Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive. This time we're taking a look at Taoist alchemy. Specifically, we're focusing on immortality and the quest for the golden elixir. And our guide for this journey is a bibliography called 9 Taoist Books on the Elixir, put together by Fabrizio Pregadio. It's almost like having a treasure map to some of the most important texts in this tradition.
These texts really do cover a lot of time and offer a glimpse into this world where science, philosophy, and spirituality are all blended together. So you'll see vivid imagery, you'll see lots of symbolism, dragons, tigers, pearls, and of course the interplay of yin and yang. All of it's pointing towards the transformation that Taoist alchemy is seeking.
Okay, before we jump into the books themselves, I think it's important to understand some of the basic concepts, especially for folks who might not be familiar with Taoist philosophy. So what exactly is the golden elixir? What's the deal with yin and yang?
Yeah, great question. In these texts, the golden elixir isn't a potion or a magical substance or anything like that. It represents this perfect state of balance and harmony within the individual, but also in their relationship with the cosmos. It's sort of like the ultimate goal of this alchemical process, a state of perfection, spiritual perfection, and immortality.
It's not necessarily a physical thing that you could hold in your hand.
Exactly. And this is where yin and yang comes in. They're fundamental concepts to Taoist thought, representing these two complementary forces that make up reality. Yin is often associated with things like darkness, passivity, femininity, whereas yang is associated with light activity and masculinity.
So how do these forces relate to the golden elixir and the quest for immortality?
So Taoist alchemy is all about harmonizing these two opposing forces within ourselves, but also the world around us. It's all about finding that balance, that perfect balance between yin and yang, which is believed to lead to health, longevity, and ultimately spiritual enlightenment.
This is fascinating. So it's not just about living longer. It's about reaching a higher state of being.
Absolutely. It's about transforming the self, not just physically, but also mentally and spiritually. And these texts we're looking at offer various methods and practices for achieving this transformation.
You mentioned earlier that there are 2 types of alchemy, Waidan and Neidan. Can you elaborate on those a little bit?
Of course. Waidan, which is often translated as external alchemy, focuses on laboratory practices, creating physical elixirs, manipulating substances out there in the world. It's a little bit more hands-on, if you will. They would use herbs, minerals, specific techniques, trying to create elixirs that they believed would promote longevity and spiritual growth.
So like the classic image of the alchemist in the lab with the flasks and bubbling concoctions.
Exactly. Then you have Neidan, which translates to internal alchemy. This one is all about cultivating and refining the energy within the body itself. So less about manipulating external substances and more about cultivating the self through practices like meditation, breath work, and visualization.
So Waidan external, Neidan internal. Makes sense. Let's dive into the first book on our list, the Judan Jing, or Scripture of the 9 Elixirs. This is the earliest complete text we have on Waidan Right. It dates back to the 2nd century CE.
It does, and it's so fascinating because it not only outlines specific alchemical formulas for creating these elixirs, but it really stresses the importance of ritual and purification throughout the process. So you'll find descriptions of ceremonies, invocations of deities, and specific guidelines for preparing your body and mind before doing any of this alchemical work.
So there's a real spiritual aspect to it. It's not just purely scientific.
Absolutely. It highlights this crucial insight into the mindset of these early alchemists. They understood that creating the elixir wasn't just about following a recipe. It required a specific mindset, this state of spiritual purity and alignment with the cosmos.
There's a passage in this text that caught my eye. It says, after ingesting a speck of this elixir for 30 days, a chick will grow wings and become a flying immortal. That's some vivid imagery.
Isn't it? And it really speaks to the symbolic nature of these texts. While there is a practical element to Waidan, there's also this deeper layer of symbolism. The chick transforming into a flying immortal can be seen as a metaphor for the human spirit achieving liberation through this alchemical process.
I'm also interested in the secrecy that runs through the text. The Judan Jing talks about avoiding negative influences during the creation of the elixir and cautions against sharing this knowledge with those who might misuse it.
Yes, this theme of secrecy and safeguarding knowledge is super prevalent in alchemical traditions. You see it everywhere. And it reflects this understanding that this knowledge is powerful, and it could be dangerous if it falls into the wrong hands. It also highlights the sacredness of this alchemical process and how important it is to treat it with reverence and respect.
Okay, let's move on to the next book. Bao Pu Zinapian, also known as Inner Chapters of Master Who Embraces Spontaneous Nature. This one's written by Ge Hong in the 4th century CE, and he's often called the greatest Chinese alchemist.
It's interesting, though, because Zhehong actually states that he never made an elixir himself.
Really?
Yeah,
That's a twist.
it is. But it shows how broad his knowledge was and his role as his compiler of Taoist practices and beliefs. His work is this valuable window into Taoist thought and practice during his time.
What are some of the things we can learn from Jiehong's work?
So despite being super into immortality, Zhehong offers some cautions. He warns against getting fixated on a single path to immortality and really stresses the importance of balanced open-mindedness, understanding the underlying principles of alchemy rather than just clinging to specific techniques.
That's a valuable perspective. It reminds us that there are lots of paths to the same goal. Staying open to different approaches is key.
Exactly. Zhehong makes another really important point. While magical abilities might be a byproduct of the alchemical process, they're not the goal. The real goal is extending lifespan and attaining true understanding.
So it's not about supernatural powers. It's about cultivating wisdom and understanding the universe and ourselves.
Precisely. Now, the next book is considered one of the most important texts in Taoist alchemy, the Zui Cantongqi, or Cantongqi for short, which translates to Token for the Agreement of the Three, according to the Book of Changes.
That's a mouthful. What are the three that it's referring to?
So the three are often interpreted as heaven, earth, and humanity. The Cantongqi stresses how interconnected these three realms are and how they relate to this whole alchemical process. It explores how these principles of the cosmos, which are in the Book of Changes, how they also operate inside of the human being, and how those can be harnessed for transformation.
Okay, starting to see the bigger picture now. You mentioned that this text is written almost entirely in poetry, which is beautiful, but also makes it harder to understand.
It does. It's one of its hallmarks. It's filled with metaphors and allegories that need careful thought and interpretation. But the core themes are pretty clear. The connection between the cosmos and the Tao, the principle of non-doing or wu-wei, and of course the path of alchemy itself.
Can you give us an example of this poetic style and maybe shed some light on those themes?
Sure, here's one. Innerly nourish yourself, serene and quiescent in empty non-being. Going back to the fundament, conceal your light and innerly illuminate your body.
Beautiful, but also pretty cryptic.
Right, but there's a lot of insight in there. Innerly nourish yourself speaks to how important it is to cultivate our inner being, our spirit, our connection to the Tao. Serene and quiescent in empty non-being points to the stillness and emptiness that you cultivate through meditation and inner alchemy. And conceal your light can be understood as this reminder to cultivate humility and to focus on inner transformation rather than external displays of power.
Wow, it's a lot to unpack from one verse.
Yeah.
Seems like these texts really reward deep contemplation.
They really do. And they might seem complicated at first, but they offer a lot of wisdom that is still relevant today. The Cantongqi, in particular, has inspired generations of alchemists, both internal and external, and its teachings still resonate with those seeking spiritual transformation.
It's amazing how these ancient texts can speak to us today. Speaking of texts that build on each other, the next one, the Longhujing, or Scripture of the Dragon and Tiger, is basically a rewording of the Cantongqi. But it uses more alchemical language and imagery.
The interesting thing is that the Longhujing was probably written after the Cantongqi, even though it's often seen as the inspiration for it. Shows how fluid these texts are and how ideas were transmitted, reinterpreted, and built on over time.
It reminds us that we're not looking at static literature, but a living tradition that evolved over centuries.
Exactly. And the Longhujing focuses on the dragon and the tiger, which gives us this glimpse into how alchemists would use imagery and allegory to convey these complex ideas and practices.
Let's talk about those legendary figures, Zhongli Quan and Lu Dongbin.
All right. The Zhonglu Chuandao Ji, or Anthology of Zhongli Quan's Transmission of the Tao to Lu Dongbin. It goes into the teachings of the Zhonglu tradition of Neidan, or internal alchemy. It's presented as a dialogue between these two legendary immortals. It offers insights into the practices and principles of cultivating inner energy and achieving longevity.
Those names sound familiar. I think I've seen them in other Taoist stories and artwork. Are they considered actual historical figures or more like mythical archetypes?
Good question. It's hard to say for sure. There's debate among scholars about whether they actually existed, but their importance to Taoist lore is clear. They're often shown as masters who achieved immortality through internal alchemy. Their stories are inspiration and guidance for practitioners.
So even if we can't confirm they existed, their symbolic importance as these exemplars of spiritual attainment is clear.
Exactly. And the Zhonglu Chuandaoji gives us valuable insight into the practices and principles they represent, particularly this cultivation and harmonization of dragon and tiger energies within the body.
This whole concept of dragon and tiger energies is intriguing. Can you break that down for us a little bit?
In Taoist alchemy, the dragon and tiger are really potent symbols. They represent the fundamental energies inside of every human. The dragon is often associated with yang energy, active, expansive, ascending, while the tiger represents yin energy, receptive, grounding, descending.
Okay, so it's like another layer of yin and yang symbolism, but specifically applied to the body.
Exactly. And the alchemical process, as described in the Zhonglu tradition, involves understanding and harmonizing these energies to achieve balance. And ultimately, that leads to the golden elixir.
This is getting pretty deep.
Mm-hmm.
Seems like we're going beyond external practices and getting into the subtle energies within the body.
You got it. And the next book we're going to look at takes us even deeper into this realm of internal alchemy. It's called Wuzhen Pian, which means awakening to reality.
The title itself sounds profound. Tell me more.
This text is considered the second most important source for Taoist alchemy after the Canton Qi, and it's written entirely from the Neidan perspective. The author Zhang Buduan, who lived in the 11th century, is a patriarch of the southern lineage of Neidan, or Nanzang. His work has been super influential in shaping the development of later schools of internal alchemy.
So this is where we get really focused on the internal practices.
Exactly. The Wuzhen Tian, just like the Canton Qi, is full of poetic language and cryptic alchemical instructions. It's a text that demands careful study and contemplation.
Do you have a verse or passage that illustrates that style and content?
Here's one. If you study immortality, you should study celestial immortality. Only the golden elixir is the highest principle.
Nice. And I remember the critique mentioned something about the significance of certain numbers in this text. 3, 5, and 1. What's that all about?
Those numbers are deeply symbolic in Taoist alchemy and numerology. The number 3, for example, often refers to the three treasures, Jing, Qi, and Shen, which represent essence, energy, and spirit.
So they're not just random numbers. They point to fundamental principles and stages of transformation within this alchemical process.
Exactly. It's another example of how these texts operate on multiple levels, weaving symbolism and numerology into their teachings.
Seems like understanding Taoist alchemy requires us to shift our perspective. We got to look beyond the literal words and really explore the symbolism, the metaphors, and the deeper philosophical concepts embedded within these texts.
Absolutely. These texts invite us to engage with them on many levels, intellectually, emotionally, and spiritually. They offer so much wisdom and insight, but they require patience, contemplation, and an open mind to really unlock those secrets.
Sounds like we're just scratching the surface of a vast and profound tradition.
Okay.
What's next on our journey through these 9 books?
Next, we'll look at a text that bridges the southern and northern lineages of Neidan. It's called Zhonheji, or Anthology of Central Harmony. The author Li Daochun gives us a clear and accessible overview of the core principles of internal alchemy. Li Daochun's Zhonheji is really like a bridge between those different schools of thought within Neidan. He helps clear up some of the complexities and seeming contradictions between the southern and northern lineages, offering this unified perspective on internal alchemy.
So he's sort of a mediator bringing those different perspectives together, highlighting the common ground between them.
Yeah, exactly. And his writing is really clear and easy to understand, which makes it a good resource for anyone who's trying to get those core principles of Neidan.
That sounds helpful, especially given how cryptic some of these other texts are. What are some of the insights that stand out in the Zhonheji?
One thing that's really interesting is how he talks about the golden elixir. He says it can be seen or perceived, but it doesn't have a physical form. It's not something you can cook up in a lab. It's a product of inner cultivation and transformation, a state of being rather than a material substance.
Yeah, that makes sense. Given the emphasis on inner transformation in Taoist alchemy, it's not about manipulating matter. It's about refining our inner being, our energy, our consciousness.
Exactly. And Li Daochun also warns against getting too hung up on specific locations in the body for alchemical practices. He says true transformation involves the whole body, mind, and spirit.
So it's not about focusing on certain energy centers or chakras. It's about cultivating a more holistic approach that involves every aspect of our being.
Exactly. It's about harmonizing the whole system, aligning with that natural flow of energy and cultivating balance and unity within ourselves.
That brings us to a text that might be more familiar to Western audiences. The Taijin Wazhongzi, better known as The Secret of the Golden Flower. This is the one that Carl Jung wrote a commentary on, right?
Yeah, that's right. The Secret of the Golden Flower became pretty popular in the West, in part because of Jung's commentary. It's often attributed to Lu Dongbin, though we don't know for sure who wrote it. But regardless, it offers a fascinating exploration of inner alchemy, with a big emphasis on the practice of circulating the light, or huiguang.
Okay, break that down for me. What is circulating the light?
It's a practice that involves cultivating awareness and directing inner light or energy to refine and transform the self. Kind of like an internal meditation where you visualize light circulating through your body, clearing out blockages and harmonizing your energy.
Sounds similar to visualization techniques used in other spiritual traditions. Is it about manipulating actual energy or more of a symbolic practice?
It can be both. Practically speaking, huiguang can be seen as a technique for cultivating and directing qi. That's the vital energy that flows through the body. But it also has this symbolic side, representing the process of bringing awareness to our inner world, illuminating those dark or unconscious parts of ourselves.
So it's like a two-pronged approach, working with energy on a physical level, but also cultivating awareness and insight on a psychological and spiritual level.
Exactly. And the Secret of the Golden Flower is full of this rich imagery and symbolism, pointing to this layered process of transformation. You'll see descriptions of generating true yang, forming an embryo within, and ultimately achieving a state of spiritual awakening and wholeness.
It sounds like a pretty profound and intricate journey. And it's interesting how all these texts we've looked at, while they use different language and imagery, they all seem to be pointing towards that same goal, realization of the golden elixir, that state of perfect balance and harmony within ourselves and in our relationship with the cosmos.
That's a great observation. It's a key takeaway from our deep dive into these 9 books. There are lots of different paths and practices within Taoist alchemy, but they all kind of come back to this central theme of transformation, refining the self-harmonizing yin and yang, and cultivating a connection with the Tao.
Like a big tapestry woven from all these different threads, each one adding to the overall beauty and complexity of the artwork.
Well said. And the last book on our list offers this really clear and spiritually focused approach to Neidan that I think might resonate with people today.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
It's the Daoshu Sherzong, or
Yeah.
12 Books on the Tao by Liu Yuming. He was a master from the 18th, 19th centuries, and he's known for his accessible writing style and his emphasis on cultivating a deep connection with the Tao.
So he would be a good place to start for someone who's new to Taoist philosophy
Yeah.
and wants to explore the core principles in a straightforward way.
Exactly. Liu Yiming does a great job of defining the Tao and how it relates to other key concepts, like the great ultimate, the golden elixir, and complete awareness. He writes, fundamentally it has no name, but if we are forced to call it, we say Tao. If it is determined, one is in error. If it is discussed, one loses it.
That's profound. It really gets at how paradoxical it is to try and define something as vast and all-encompassing as the Tao.
Yeah, exactly. By its nature, the Tao defies definition. It's the source of everything, yet it's beyond everything.
It seems like a core principle in Taoism is to embrace that paradox, accepting that there are limits to our understanding, and that true wisdom lies in recognizing the mystery and the unknowable.
That's a great point. And Liu Yiming's writing embodies that principle. He doesn't try to nail down the Tao or give it a rigid definition. Instead, he points towards it, inviting the reader to experience it directly through contemplation, meditation, and inner cultivation.
He also offers some insights into the interplay of yin and yang, right? I feel like that's been a theme throughout a lot of these books.
It has. Liu Yiming really emphasizes the importance of understanding that dynamic interplay of yin and yang and how they relate to the Tao. He sees them not as opposing forces, but as complementary aspects of one whole.
So it's not about getting rid of one or the other. It's about finding that balance and harmony between them.
Precisely. And he reminds us that that balance is always in motion. Just like in nature, yin and yang are always interacting and transforming, giving rise to all the phenomena in the universe.
It's like a cosmic dance with yin and yang as the partners, weaving the tapestry of creation through their harmonious interplay.
Beautiful way to put it. Understanding that dance both within ourselves and in the world around us is key to aligning with the Tao and reaching our full potential.
It's amazing how these 9 books spanning centuries and representing different schools of thought, they all offer valuable pieces to this puzzle of understanding Taoist alchemy and the quest for the golden elixir.
It really has been quite a journey. We've explored these ancient texts, decoded the symbolism, delved into this world of energy cultivation. But I think the most important question is, how do we apply all of this to our lives today?
Yeah, that's the big question. It's one thing to understand these concepts intellectually, but how do we integrate them into our daily experience?
Yeah, that's where it gets really interesting. These texts aren't just meant to be read and admired, they're meant to be lived and embodied. They offer us a map for inner transformation. But we have to take the first step and start the journey.
So we're moving from the theoretical to the practical, from the realm of books and ideas to the realm of experience and action.
Exactly. And even though we've covered a lot in our deep dive, I think we're really just scratching the surface. These teachings offer a lifetime of exploration and discovery.
Kind of like those alchemists working in their labs, experimenting, refining, and searching for those secrets of the golden elixir. We're on our own alchemical journey, but the laboratory is our own inner world.
That's a great way to put it. And anyone can go on this journey. You don't need a fancy lab or special equipment. All you need is a willingness to explore, a commitment to practice, and an open mind.
So for someone who's feeling inspired by these teachings, what would you recommend as a first step? Where do they begin this inner alchemical process?
I'd say go back to the text that really resonated with you. Reread it slowly, take notes, highlight key passages, and then think about exploring some of the practices that are mentioned. Maybe it's meditation, breathwork, visualization, or even just spending time in nature and connecting with the Tao.
So it's about finding a practice that clicks for you and sticking with it.
Yeah.
It's not about doing everything at once. It's about taking small, consistent steps on the path.
You got it. And there's no one right way to do it. The journey of transformation is unique to each person. What works for one person might not work for another. It's all about experimenting, listening to your inner guidance, and finding what feels true and aligned for you.
And it's not about being perfect, is it? It's about embracing the process with all its ups and downs and trusting that we're moving towards a deeper understanding of ourselves and the universe.
Exactly. The alchemists knew that transformation takes time, patience, and persistence. There will be bumps in the road, but each step, even the missteps, are chances to learn and grow.
It's like refining those base metals. They had to go through so much heat and pressure to become gold. We too might face challenges and discomfort as we refine our inner being. But through it all, there's the potential for something really beautiful and valuable to come out of it.
Well said. And I think it's important to remember that the search for the golden elixir isn't a solo mission. While the alchemical process happens within the individual, we can really benefit from connecting with others who are on the same path.
So finding a community or a teacher or a group of like-minded people can help along the way.
Exactly. The alchemists back in the day often worked in secret, but they also saw the value in shared knowledge and transmission. Finding a qualified teacher who can offer one-on-one instruction and make sense of these complex concepts can be super helpful. And connecting with other people who are on the same path can be encouraging. It can keep you accountable and give you a sense of shared purpose.
So we're back to that idea of lineage and transmission that we talked about earlier. These teachings have been passed down for generations, and now we're part of that lineage.
We are. And I think we have a responsibility to honor that tradition, not just by studying and practicing these teachings, but also by sharing them with others and making sure they're preserved and passed on.
Like receiving this precious gift and then sharing it with future generations, adding our own experiences and insights along the way.
I like that. That's a great way to wrap things up.
This has been an incredible look into the world of Taoist alchemy.
Yeah, it has. As we conclude this exploration of these 9 books, remember that the quest for the golden elixir isn't over. It's just as relevant today as it was centuries ago.
We've gone through these incredible texts and explored the concepts, the symbolism, the practices. But what does it all mean for someone listening right now, here in the 21st century?
It's so interesting to think about how these ancient teachings could apply to our modern lives. These texts aren't just dusty old relics. They offer this timeless wisdom that can help us on our own path, a path of self-discovery and transformation.
I keep coming back to this idea of balance. We've seen it over and over. Yin and yang, the dragon and tiger, the integration of internal and external practices. It seems like finding balance in ourselves and in how we relate to the world is like a key principle in Taoist alchemy.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not about some static, perfect state. It's about embracing how these opposing forces work together, finding that place where everything just flows, effortlessly and harmoniously.
It makes me think about how we face challenges in our own lives. Do we look at them as obstacles or as opportunities to learn and grow?
Great point. The alchemists saw those challenges as essential to the process. Just like heating and purifying base metals was part of turning them into gold. Our own difficulties can refine us. They refine our character, our spirit.
So instead of fighting those difficulties, we should embrace them.
Exactly. And this brings us back to wu wei, or non-action. It's not about being passive. It's about aligning ourselves with the natural flow of the Tao, letting go of our need to control everything and allowing things to just happen.
Like going with the flow instead of swimming upstream all the time.
Exactly. And those texts we looked at, they offer all kinds of techniques for getting to that state of effortlessness, meditation, breathwork, visualization, all sorts of things.
So finding those practices that help us quiet our minds, connect with that inner wisdom we all have.
And remember those symbolic numbers we talked about, 3, 5, and 1. They represent those key stages in the alchemical process and give us a framework for understanding this whole journey of transformation.
Right, they remind us that the process isn't a straight line. It's a cycle with times of growth, expansion, contraction, and integration.
Exactly. Each stage is important to the overall transformation. It's not about rushing to the finish line. It's about being present for the journey itself.
I've learned so much about Taoist alchemy. I'm feeling inspired to explore these teachings more and see how I can bring them into my own life.
That's great. Remember, this is just the start. These 9 books hold a lifetime of wisdom and insight. The more we study them, the more we'll discover.
It really is like having a treasure map, leading us to this vast, uncharted territory. The journey keeps going, and the discoveries are endless.
Couldn't have said it better myself. So as we wrap up our deep dive, I want to leave everyone with this. The search for the golden elixir isn't just about changing ourselves. It's also about making the world around us a better place.
So it's not just about reaching enlightenment for ourselves, it's about using our wisdom and compassion to help others and care for the planet.
Absolutely. The alchemists wanted to bring harmony and balance to the cosmos through their work. And we can do the same thing in our relationships, our communities, and our planet.
It's a beautiful thought that our own inner transformation is connected to the transformation of the world around us.
It really is. So as we cultivate our own inner golden elixir, we're not just changing ourselves, we're helping to change the world.
What a beautiful thought to end on.
It's been a pleasure diving into these texts with you and all our listeners.
Thanks for being our guide on this incredible journey into Taoist alchemy.
And to everyone listening, thank you so much for joining us. May you find inspiration and guidance on your own path of transformation.